we go. Okay, everybody, welcome back. It is wonderful to see everybody, and welcome to Glimpses of Greatness. This is the opportunity as we get a chance to have a few words with Rabbi Yona Reiss as we think about Rabbi Gedaliah Dov Schwartz. Before we start, I just want to start off by thanking our sponsors. This entire program is kindly sponsored by Toby and Nachman Lokshin on the occasion of the 25th yahrzeit of Toby's father, Avram Fleischer, Avram Eliezer ben Yehuda Leib Olav Hashalom Nishmasa Eden, the amount of zechus of all the people reached through this program, through these Divrei Torah and this perspective, should be a tremendous zechus for Aliyas Neshama. I also want to thank the sponsors today for the program, and that is today's prayer session is sponsored by Shelley and Anne Galambek and Zev and Aviva Galambek, and that is on the yahrzeit of Shelley and Zev's father, Mr. Hyman Galambek, Chaim Pinchas ben Moshe Yosef, and I think that he and the family would have very much appreciated the yashrus and the personality of Rabbi Schwartz as a very mat'im perspective to be sharing. We're also thanking Mark and Rena Questel, who are sponsoring for the yahrzeit of Rena's grandfather, Rav Chaim Yaakov ben Yitzchak. B'metz Hashem, he should have continued Aliyas Neshama, and the family should have continued Chizuk be'ezras Hashem always. And just also coming in just last minute, we also want to appreciate and extend our thanks to the Weg family, who are sponsoring. Ira and Susan are sponsoring upon the birth of their granddaughter, Bela Ariela, born to their sons Debbie and Yosef Weg. And Susan mentioned that Yosef Weg used to work with you, Rabbi Reiss, as the president of SOI, so they felt very especially connected. I remember that as well. So it's for many good and wonderful occasions. So let's jump straight in. I for those who don't know yet, who have not had a chance to meet or learn from Rabbi Reiss, why not yet? That's the question. It's a tremendous opportunity to be welcoming Rabbi Reiss. I just want a little bit of background for those who haven't had the chance to meet Rabbi Reiss. Rabbi Reiss is not only a tremendous Talmid Chacham, an attorney and a jurist. He is based in the CRC in Chicago, Rosh Hashiva at Yeshua Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan at Reiss, and also is a Chava based in America, where he used to serve as the administrator for 10 years between 1998 and 2008, also dealing with many of the 9/11 Aguna cases. Rabbi Reiss is a summa cum laude graduate of the Yale Law School, and is a graduate of summa cum laude of Yeshiva College and a graduate of Yale Law School. He has also served as the Yale Law Journal senior editor. He has smicha from Reiss and also has Yadin, which is the advanced learning through Choshen Mishpat as well. Rabbi Reiss has been a propagator of the prenup and has popularized the prenup both halachically and legally in our communities, and has written many articles from journals from Shari Tzedek, Beis Yitzchak, Kol Tzvi, to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And just recently, I was very excited to see in the most recent Jewish Action that Rabbi Reiss has just come out with a new sefer of Shalos and Shuvos called Kanfei Yona. And I don't think we fully appreciate what it is to have a person of such a perspective of magnitude in our community and serving our community. And I would say on a personal note, I had the great zechus of serving as the head gabbai when Rabbi Reiss was the dean of Reiss. And so I had the opportunity of working closely and getting to learn many administrative and perspectives, and how to deal with people in a way of yashrus, all the way through from the transition from the old base medrash to the new base medrash. I really treasured those years in that relationship, and it's a pleasure to continue that relationship. Rabbi Reiss has always been very gracious with his time whenever I have a question, certainly in the realms of Choshen Mishpat and beyond. Thank you, Rabbi Reiss, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Rabbi Trump.
It really is, and we should know also, by the way, that Rabbi Reiss is 1 hour earlier than us in Chicago, so he's come especially early to join us this morning. Let's start. Rabbi Reiss, I think we had the opportunity of being in Chicago for a short 2-year period, and we got to meet Rabbi Schwartz. But I feel like a lot of people don't understand the impact, don't understand just who he was for us and for globally. You can just get a little bit of a background as to the background of who Rabbi Schwartz was.
I think Rabbi Schwartz epitomized the rabbinic saying, "Man malchi rabbanan," that who are the real kings in our midst. Those are the rabbis. And he demonstrated how to have a regal bearing, how to always conduct himself with a spirit of refinement. And he was also, I would say, first and foremost, an incredibly knowledgeable and erudite Talmudic and rabbinic scholar. You could ask him a question in all of the four halakim of Shulchan Aruch, and he always would be able to give you a precise answer and mara makom, justifying his response with the appropriate sources, whether it be a siman in Shulchan Aruch or whether it be some obscure tshuva in a sefer that nobody else had ever really heard of or had barely ever glimpsed at. He was a master of all information. But not only that, but he was a true Torah Umada personality, somebody who attended yeshiva college as a young child. He was born in 1925 in Newark. And in those days, they didn't have a proliferation of yeshivas like we have nowadays. He went to public school through high school, but he had a private tutor through Rabbi Mendelson, who was the Rav in Newark at the time. And he was able to really become a great scholar through tremendous self-motivation. And then when he finally made it to Yeshiva College, he had a tremendous passion for the learning that he was able to imbibe from his Rosh Yeshiva there. This is the 1940s. And he wasn't a classic Talmud of the Rav per se. I don't know if the Rav had fully established himself even in the 1940s. This was just when he was beginning his tenure. I would say probably the main Rosh Yeshiva that Rav Schwartz learned by was Moshe Shatzkis, who was the Lamzher Rav. And he would still be able to say over shiurim that he heard from his college days, pretty much verbatim. But one thing about Rav Schwartz is that he had a prodigious memory. Not only did he remember all the Torah that he learned, but he remembered pretty much any conversation he ever had with anybody, any interaction he ever had with anybody. He remembered people's names, who they were related to, what was going on in their lives. He would meet somebody he hadn't seen in 40 years and be able to pick up the conversation on whatever was going on with them the last time around. This is just an absolutely rare ability that only few people are blessed with, but Rabbi Schwartz was able to use this ability in the best possible way. And then after Rav Schwartz completed Yeshiva University, he received smicha. He took a number of rabbinic positions in places really, very far and spread out that may not even have from communities anymore, but he really got a sense of the nitty gritty of the rabbinate from the front lines. He was in Providence, Rhode Island in 1951, and he left his shul when they decided to do away with the mechitza. Just to give you a sense of the American rabbinate in those days, as soon as they made that decision, he got on the next train out of Providence. No compromises from Rabbi Schwartz when it came to religious observance or halakhic standards. 1953 or so, he took a pulpit in Brooklyn in Park Slope, and there as well, he found that they weren't so interested in high-level, rigorous Torah learning or drasha, so he quickly, exited from that place as well. Then in 1957, he took a pulpit in Englishtown, New Jersey. Things were a little bit better over there. They treated the rabbinate with greater respect. Then a few years later, he made his way to Philadelphia, where his wife's family had tremendous connections. He married a woman from the Pupko family, and there were a lot of Pupkos in that area who had major rabbinic positions, and they asked him to come. And then he was invited to take over the Young Israel of Borough Park in 1968. And there, that was a real, rabbinic kingdom for him. People really, treated him with respect and treated the Torah that he was teaching with respect. And during all of these different periods, he had the opportunity to get involved with the local kashrus, and he learned a lot about the ins and outs of shechita. He was somebody who could walk into a slaughterhouse, into a packing house, put on a hard hat, and be able to contend with the best of them in terms of both his knowledge of shechita and his ability to interact with the most hardened shochtim and meat plant managers. He was a tough fellow. Tough not in terms of being, mean-spirited, but tough in terms of being able to hold his own, shall we say, in any circumstances, a meat plant or otherwise. While he was in Borough Park, he got, first when he was in Philadelphia, and then after when he was in Borough Park, he got involved with Seder Gittin because he found that in Philadelphia, his brother-in-law, Rabbi Pupko there, had been the Messiah Get, and then after he was nifter, Rabbi Schwartz needed to take over that position and learn all about the nuances of Seder Gittin. So he became much more involved as a Bezdin personality. When he moved to Borough Park, Rabbi Moshe Steinberg, who was the Ab Bezdin of the Beit Din of America, interviewed him to be one of the Messiah Gittin at the Beit Din of America, liked very much his style, particularly the way that he explained things to people, the way that he was very down to earth and knew how to address everybody properly. And due to his vast worldly knowledge as well, he always was interested in everything. All of the Mada subjects, he spoke, he could speak French, he knew classic literature, he knew world history. I was amazed at just how much he knew about everything. So that served him well when he had to deal with people of disparate backgrounds, and they were impressed by his worldly knowledge, wisdom, vocabulary, and so forth. So Rabbi Steinberg hired him to be one of the Messiah Gittin at the Beit Din of America. And after Rabbi Steinberg's passing in the mid to late 1980s, when the Beit Din of America was looking for a new Beis Din, so he was an obvious, choice, and that's how he eventually became Beis Din of the Beit Din of America. And a few years earlier than that, in 1986, when the Chicago Rabbinical Council was looking for a new Beis Din, they also recognized the greatness of Rabbi Schwartz, and they had already reached out to him, and he made a decision to move the family from Borough Park to Chicago. So first he moved to Chicago, became the Beis Din in 1986, 1987 or so here in Chicago. And 1991, he was appointed as the new Beis Din of the Beit Din of America in New York. And that's how many people in our community got to know him, as sort of the Beis Din for our community, the Yeshiva University community, Rabbinical Council of America community, Orthodox Union community, you name it, the centrist Orthodox community. He was both the Beis Din, he was appointed as the head of the RCA Halacha Commission, after Rav Soloveitchik, and he was the go-to person because of, number one, his halachic prowess, and number two, because of his general, worldly, erudition and ability to speak to all people in a way that they could respect. And number three, because of his tremendous warmth, sensitivity, and interpersonal skills. He knew how to speak to people. He knew how to speak to any audience, whether it was a one-on-one conversation, whether it was in front of a small group, whether it was in front of a large group. He just always knew how to be shava the whole nefesh. So this is, a little bit of background of Rabbi Schwartz. He emerged as really a gadol, within our midst, and a gadol from our midst.
Very much so. Very much so. Wow, I didn't even know some of those details. It makes sense. I remember when we were in Chicago, Rabbi Brandt, the Rosh Kollel of the YU Kollel, would bring us to meet with him, every so often, every few months, and he would have all these snippets from the rabbinate, and his perspective of the rabbinate. So he sort of had his foot in that world at the same time as the world of the Beis Din as well.
He was a master darshan. He could, give a sermon at the drop of a hat. And always gave a masterful drasha. He used to, give as a mashal that there was some war. Maybe he was speaking about World War I. I don't remember anymore. There was one side that was just very, proficient in the skirmishes of a battle because they didn't have lots and lots of artillery and weapons, but they had sharpshooters, and they had, just a few bullets, and they knew exactly how to aim them properly. So he said that this was what he believed to be the role of the Rav when he gave a drasha, not to bring 20, 30 different sources and show off your erudition, but to pick that one kernel, that one point that would drive the message home. And he was really a master at that. He was very modest, but I remember him once just making an offhand statement to me, just kind of like as a joke when he was recounting his days in the rabbinate. He said, if you woke me up like at 2 a.m. and asked me to give an appeal for, any stuck or cause, I could give a knockout appeal, just, right out of my sleep. He felt that he had mastered the art of figuring out exactly how to give, the right type of appeal that would resonate. He could just, whip out a knockout appeal on a moment's notice.
Amazing. I actually remember that example you gave. I think I remember it was the Germans versus the Russians. I think the Germans were more pinpointed, whereas the Russians just carpet bombed.
I think so. I think it was about the Germans, but I don't want to say anything nice about the Germans.
No, just perspective. He was able to take anything he saw and harness it. Rabbi Reiss, when was the first time you connected with Rabbi Schwartz?
I remember the first time that I met Rabbi Schwartz was in the Smicha program at YU, when I was just starting out in the Smicha program. It must have been the late 1980s, shortly after he had been appointed as the Abbezin of the Chicago Rabbinical Council. I don't know if they flew him in for this presentation. It was one of the supplementary rabbinic courses that we took in those days, and the specific class that he was brought in to teach was a rabbi's library. What are the svarim that a rabbi is supposed to have? And he went through, the different types of categories of svarim, of parshanos and darsha, and of lumdus, and basic svarim, primary svarim, secondary svarim, and he knew a lot about svarim. That was clear. But what impressed me about his presentation was just he had an aura of authenticity to him, a tremendous rabbinic presence. That's what stood out. I never really knew who he was at that point in time. Then I was reintroduced to him in the late 1990s when I got involved with the Bet Din of America. I've been practicing law for several years, and then I took off some time to learn in the Yadin program full time because I really wanted to pursue my degree in halachic jurisprudence, shall we say, without knowing that this was going to become a career for me at the time. And I started volunteering at the Bet Din of America, and sure enough, who was there, who would come in once a month, was Rabbi Schwartz, and I started driving him places, schmoozing with him, getting shimush from him. He was always very warm and accommodating and generous with his time and with his advice. And eventually, I started to correspond with him halakhically, to write some shilos, write some chuvos, and he would review what I wrote, and he seemed to like whatever I did, and he gave me more and more shimush. And then when I was appointed as the new Menahel, the director of the Bet Din of America in 1998, decided not to go back to my law firm at that time, but to take the position. So that's when our relationship really solidified. When he would come to the Bet Din of America once a month, he would fly in once a month for a few days. He would always stay in my house. That was our arrangement. He became extremely close with my family, really up until the very end. He was almost like an extended member of the family, like an honorary grandfather. He took a tremendous personal interest in all of our children. Even after he had his stroke, he insisted that I bring him, a pen that he could write in these mikros gedolos that he had purchased for one of my sons who became bar mitzvah shortly before his stroke. He had in mind to inscribe something to him in the sefer that he had bought, and he with great difficulty, he wasn't able to really write, but somehow he conjured up an inscription at that point in time, because it was so important to him to have that kesher with my son, with all the members of my family. And it became, more than just, shimush, more than just, a Rebbe Talmud relationship. It really became more of a familial relationship. When they were looking here in Chicago for somebody to help out Rabbi Schwartz as he started to enter into partial retirement, to scale back his hours at the CRC, and they realized that they needed to groom, somebody else, and they were looking for a new Bezdin figure. They would make Rabbi Schwartz into the Rosh Bezdin. So they reached out to me in large part because, it's a delicate thing. You bring in, somebody else to assume a position. And they knew that Rabbi Schwartz was 100% comfortable with me, so that it would be an easy transition. And in fact, Rabbi Schwartz very strongly encouraged me to take the position. That's how I ended up here in Chicago.
That's incredible. That was about 10 years ago that started happening.
It's about 8 years ago, but yeah, it was a while ago. It was very, very, very worthwhile, at least from my perspective.
Actually, it's incredible. Actually, I'm going to share the picture, if that's all right, of the two of you, just for people to have a sense of. Sometimes we don't associating a face. This is a very beautiful picture of the two of you that you shared, and what makes it even more special is the fact that it's in the CRC based-in room with the background, the wood-paneled room with the tzedek behind it, behind the two of you. Do you remember when was this taken?
This was taken in the CRC courtroom. They have a Bezdin courtroom in the CRC building. The CRC, the Chicago Rabbinical Council, is a wonderful organization that has a combination of kashrus department and also a fully functioning Bezdin. And we all work together seamlessly. It's all interwoven. The Bezdin serves as the halachic authority for the kashrus department, and we all kind of have a similar mission of serving, the Jewish community in all possible, facets and aspects. And I think at one point in time, there was a decision made that we should have better, photos for publicity purposes of all of the different figures who work in the CRC. So they brought in a professional photographer, and they snapped a bunch of different pictures of everybody. I couldn't tell you what year it took place. But at some point in time, we took these pictures, and it's nice to have.
It's incredible. I remember when it came to those kind of things, he was just so gracious. I remember one time I had to film him because we wanted to give a video Devar Torah for the Kollel at the time. And I came in, and he was just very gracious about everything. There wasn't any extra words, but it was just very, very simple and to the point. You want to take a picture? You want to take a video? Okay, I'll come along. And he was just very down to earth. At the same time as being this incredible intellect. One of the things that just is really incredible is that he was such he had so much ability to sort of see all different disciplines, like you mentioned, and like he remembered everything that happens in his life. What was one of the most, I'd say, surprising events or interactions that you had with him, where you really just didn't expect him to know even that subject that you're dealing with?
I remember, this is probably not, an example that you're looking for per se, but, when he would come to my house in Riverdale for his monthly visits. So, he got to see everything that went on with all of the kids. And he seemed to approve of the way that we were raising our children, which was pretty, incredible to us, because we didn't feel like we had a clue of what we were doing. But, Baruch Hashem, maybe in part based on his influence, we're very, very grateful. But at one point there was like a little room where we had, not a TV, but like a screen where we could play videos and stuff for the children. So we bought a bunch of old Popeye videos, like the original ones, from the 1930s, like the really, the good stuff. Because I felt that it was important for my children to have a well-rounded cleanup. They should, they should learn some Popeye. So they're sitting there watching Popeye, and like my wife is just, absolutely like, humiliated that here's Rabbi Schwartz watching our children, watching these Popeye cartoons. And she thought that he's going to, either walk away or maybe not say anything out of respect, or give us like a gentle, rebuke. Maybe there are better things they could be watching. But instead, he sat down and he watched a couple of cartoons with them. And then like he came up and he said, oh, this fellow who was behind Popeye is Max Fleischer. And, he was like this real gadol when it came to animation. And, he really had a good sense. And he started talking about the history of animation and Max Fleischer. And that was Rabbi Schwartz,
Everything, really, it was really everything.
Yeah.
Everything you saw was just incredible. Just incredible.
Right.
Rabbi Reiss, was there like a particular Dvar Torah, something that you learned from him that you felt? I mean, there's so many things. You just seeing him and watching him, but is there a specific Dvar Torah that you'd be comfortable sharing, just to get a sense of some of the Torah that he taught as well?
Yeah, look, Rabbi Schwartz, always had Torah befiv. He was, it was Shem Hashem Shagur befiv, and there were always nuggets of Torah that were dripping from his lips. But we're approaching now the Pesach season, so there was one Dvar Torah that he would like to say regarding Pesach and the Seder that gave a good glimpse and perspective of his view of the world, his positive view of everything, and also his view of the centrality of family and how much love needs to be focused, within a person's home. That was always a major theme of his. Whenever he would speak to me, it was always to remind me that I shouldn't work too hard because I had to devote appropriate time to my wife, to my children. That was a major theme of his. He was very, very concerned about families, about, Shalom Bayis. So he said something interesting in Parshas Bo. We have, 3 out of the 4 Abba Banim, and you have the pasuk V'yak Yamu Aleichem Avodah Zos Lachem. That your children will say, "What's this avoda? What's this toil, hard work? Servitude? That you're engaged in as you're preparing for Pesach." And we know that this typifies the Sheila of the Ben Harosha. And then the Torah goes on to say, "V'matim zera Pesach ula Hashem." And then after this episode, the Torah concludes this portion by saying, "Vayikora Ha'am Yishtachavu," that the people kneeled down and they bowed. So it sounded like they were kneeling with like a sense of gratitude and happiness. So Rashi says that if you look at the psukim describe the eventual gula, besuas hagula uvias haaretz, that they were, being thankful for the fact that they were being promised they're going to enter into the land of Israel and so forth. And then he adds, uvesuas habanim shiyu lachem. And the fact that they were going to have children. So they were also showing appreciation for that. So Rabbi Schwartz asked the kasha, what do you mean? There are different shilas of different, children that we find in the Torah. But the child in this particular portion happens to be the Ben Harosha. This is the child who asks, so what's this gratitude? So we said, you have to be thankful for any child. It doesn't matter. So the child will turn out to be a Rasha, will have, all of these defiant, questions and interactions with you. You have to be thankful for that as well. Thankful that a Kodesh Baruch Hu is giving you a mishpacha. Thankful that you're able to carry out a conversation, even with a rebellious and defiant child, because you don't give up on anybody. You're thankful that you have the opportunity to be mechanech somebody, even if it comes with difficulty, even if it comes with challenges. So that still gives you life, that still gives you vitality, it still gives you a sense of purpose in this world. You should be thankful for that as well. Remember, that was something that, resonated with me. It really said a lot about Rabbi Schwartz's perspective.
Yeah, I actually piggybacking onto that idea. One of the things that, as I've based him, I mean, it's he had to deal obviously with very difficult cases. I know that, and sometimes very difficult people. I know that he didn't veer. I remember in your eulogy, you said he didn't veer away from the difficult cases or the difficult situations, even though it put him under fire. Can you talk to that a little bit, like, his willingness to always find truth?
I was thinking about Rabbi Schwartz this past Shabbos as I was being Mavis Sedra and reading the Rashis on Parshas Mishpatim. So I was thinking on the pasuk of Lo Sieh Acharei Rabim Latos Lo Saneh Arivlin Tos Acharei Rabim Lahatos different interpretations that Rashi brings down about you need a super majority to rule against somebody in a Dinei Nefashos case, and only one majority of one to exonerate somebody. He brings different interpretations, but then he says, I'm going to give you my own interpretation. Whoever you see, everybody's going in the wrong direction, and they're really perverting justice, but that seems to be just the majority approach. They're looking the other way. They're not tackling corruption that's occurring within the community. So there might be a temptation to say, they're the Rabbim, they're the majority. What do I know? Why should I go against their approach? So he says, no, Elemor es hamishpat kasher hu. Do not follow in the ways of the majority in such a case, but rather say the truth. Say what is justice according to the truth of what it is. And everybody else will have to live with the consequences of their actions or inactions, as the case may be. And I was thinking, this is so appropriate for Rabbi Schwartz, because if he saw that there wasn't a sufficient sensitivity for the plight of agunot, for example, around him, or people weren't taking aggressive enough action that could be justified up the halacha, he didn't say, I'm going to follow the majority. The other Rabbanim don't feel that it's fit to come up with a heter or to fight harder in this case. So therefore, I'll just follow, the majority of all of the other leaders. That was never his attitude. His attitude was, Eina dava taloy elabi. That he had this personal responsibility. He had to do, like it said, in the wood panel and on the wall, tzedek tirdov. This was his personal responsibility as a mani kador, as an abezdin, as a dayan for Klal Yisrael, and therefore he would fight very, very hard. When other people would give up, he would continue to fight on behalf of the downtrodden, for the agunot in particular, find the terem, for people who might have been safek mamzerim, and was not at all reluctant to issue psakim that he felt were justified, even when other people were hesitant to do so. And that was very much Rabbi Schwartz's mantra up until the very end. And sometimes he got flack for it, sometimes he was criticized for it, but he didn't care, because he felt that his job wasn't, to be the most, honored person in the universe. Sometimes Ratzoy the Rovichav is good enough. His job was to do the right thing, to follow truth and justice, to follow the mandate of a dayan, as the Rambam describes it, to save the vulnerable and the oppressed from their persecutors. And that was the way that he conducted himself.
Unbelievable. Did he have a role when you were working with the prenup and the halachic prenup? Was he involved in that process as well?
He was involved with the prenup. He was a big supporter of the prenup. He was a big supporter of anything which was, halachically viable that could help the plight of agunot. There's a mechanism known as hachakos d'Rabbeinu Tam. That you can sometimes impose a type of sanctions upon a husband who's refusing to give a get, where the halacha doesn't allow for outright coercion. You could do hachakos. You can impose distancing measures, which is more of a withholding of the benefits than an imposition of penalties. So it's not considered to be coercion. It doesn't, if the husband gives a get because you're withholding community benefits from him, so then it doesn't run afoul of the notion of a get me'usa, of a coerced get. So he very much held by such things, and whenever there was a recalcitrant husband, he was very comfortable signing a seruv, an order of recalcitrance, saying that the community should shun him, in the sense of not giving this person honors, not inviting the person to bar mitzvahs or weddings, of protesting against the person, organizing demonstrations in the streets, not welcoming the person as a member of good standing within the community. He very much supported all of these types of efforts. There was one time, so the Vilna Gaon says that a justification for these things, of why is it not considered to be coercion? He says, the person can leave this community and go and join a different community. We see that happen in New York a lot. A person just goes to a different shtibel. They'll give him an aliyah. So therefore, it's not considered to be coercion. So we had a case in the Beis Din where a judge had issued a contempt order against the husband. If he doesn't give a get, then the judge is going to throw the man in jail. So when the man came to give a get, and Rabbi Schwartz asked him the normal questions, are you giving the get of your own free will? So the man said, well, the judge said he's going to throw me in jail if I don't give the get. So many people would have said, okay, I guess we can't do the get. So, I'm sorry, a get has to be given of one's own free will, and figure it's unfortunate, but there's nothing you could do in that case. So Rabbi Schwartz said, well, we're here in Illinois. So the judge issued this order for the state of Illinois. If you would go to Indiana, which is only about an hour away from here, would they throw you in jail in Indiana? Or is this an order only for the state of Illinois? So the man said, well, it's a state order. It's only in Illinois. If I went to Indiana, I wouldn't be subject to it. So Rabbi Schwartz said that you could go to Indiana. You have a choice right now. Go to Indiana, or if you want to stay in Illinois, give your wife a get. So he gave his wife a get. He didn't want to go to Indiana. But that was Rabbi Schwartz following the halacha. He said, that's the Vilna Gaon. You're not coerced. You could go somewhere else.
Incredible. Rabbi Reiss, do you want to just speak to the fact of how he was able to hold the Chicago community together, like the incredible achdus that seems to go on in the Chicago community of the right wing, the YU world, everybody, and Schwartz's, so to speak, respect that he commanded in all these different camps.
If you respect everybody else, so you end up getting respected yourself. Rabbi Schwartz always treated everybody, whether they were to the left or whether they were to the right. He always treated everybody with a sense of respect. He had no tolerance for people who acted with contempt against Rabbanim or people who acted with contempt against the Torah. Don't think that he was like a pushover. Rabbi Schwartz wasn't a pushover. If there was a Rav in the community who violated any of the rules that were imposed by the Chicago Rabbinical Council, such as that you don't do your own, private gerus, and you don't, give your own private hechsherim. He could be very, very, tough. As I mentioned, he had toughness to him, and he did not tolerate such breaches. But if a person, treated the rabbinate with respect and they treated Torah with respect, so then it didn't matter to him if the person wore a black hat or whether they wore a kippah sruga. Or if they wore no kippah at all, but a person had a basic, sense of respect for Torah. So then Rabbi Schwartz treated, everybody the same in that regard, with a sense of humanity and compassion and sensitivity, and people appreciated that. He always got along with the Tells crowd here and the Lakewood crowd here, in Chicago, number one, because how could you not respect Rabbi Schwartz's erudition? He knew everything. And number two, because Rabbi Schwartz didn't look to make waves with respect to their own jurisdiction, with respect to their own shuls and yeshivas, and he wasn't imposing his worldview upon anybody else per se. And he gave everybody space, and there was a legendary partnership between Rabbi Schwartz and Rabbi Avraham Chaim Levin, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Telz for many, many years. There was a special Beis Din that was convened here in Chicago to deal with cases involving child molestation and the like, and which acted in tandem with lawyers and therapists. It wasn't, against the law. It was to do things, in a proper fashion. And they were always able to work together because they respected each other's constituencies, and the fact that they stood for the cause of Torah. The other, population that he reached was the Federation population, made up of a diverse group of rabbis from, both the Orthodox world, but also the non-Orthodox world, conservative rabbis, Reform rabbis, and they would take a trip every single year to Europe And Rabbi Schwartz would go on this Federation trip. He would give special shiurim, and then they would go to Eretz Yisrael afterwards. And he never compromised on his principles during this trip. During this trip, everybody was from. They had minyanim and everything done, properly. The kashrus was impeccable, and people came out of it with such a profound respect for Rabbi Schwartz that the rabbis from the non-Orthodox shuls decided if they ever have a divorce in their community, they would send the couple, to the CRC. And then when Rabbi Schwartz wasn't able to go anymore, he encouraged me to go, and I'm always sensitive to politics. I just try to get along with everybody, but also don't, want to make any waves or be, subject to undue, criticism. Rabbi Schwartz said it's really, really important that you go on these trips. So I started going and, giving a shiurim as well. And I mentioned that the levaya for Rabbi Schwartz, that the non-Orthodox rabbis were so impressed with his manner and demeanor that they would send, gittin to Rabbi Schwartz and to the CRC. And one of the rabbis, the conservative reform, sent me an email saying that he watched the levaya and he wanted me to know that Ada Yom Hazeh, until this very day, he still sends all the gifts into the Chicago Rabbinical Council. He was pleased with that comment. That he felt it meant something to him to acknowledge the bond that Rabbi Schwartz established with everybody.
It's incredible. It's incredible. How was it? I was really out of Chicago at the time when he suffered that stroke. How was Rabbi Schwartz in the last years after he suffered that stroke?
Rabbi Schwartz, the incredible thing about the stroke was really two things. One, the Rabbi Schwartz never suffered any mental impairment. He was still, even though his body was really racked with pain and he was limited in his mobility, that's the reality. It was a substantial stroke, but he still had his koach hadibur, and he still had his koach hamachshava. He couldn't speak, in the same commanding tone. But you could understand, certainly what he was saying, and that he couldn't conduct long, sustained conversations because his body was very fatigued. So the conversations needed to be short. But I would come to Rabbi Schwartz, so we would learn Daf Yomi together, and I would start a line, and then Rabbi Schwartz, every now and then I would pause because I know it was like we engaged in this exercise. Where I would say the beginning of the line, and he would finish the end of the line, Baal Peh. So just as a way of keeping his mental sharpness, but also to continue to be involved in learning. And I would talk to him, about different inyanim in the community, different things that the Beis Din was doing. And he appreciated just continuing to be, informed. Sometimes he would make a comment about how he was pleased about something. So that I think was one thing that struck me, is just how sharp his mind continued to be. But the other aspect that I found also inspiring was how he never really complained. He maintained the same sense of equanimity, regardless of the challenges. He had many difficult personal challenges in his life, but he didn't complain about it, and he accepted everything with smeich and b'yisurin, accepted everything with a sense of simcha, with a sense of maturity, and was able to focus on just whatever it was that he could accomplish, and whatever positive effects he could have on other people.
Incredible. Reiss, as time draws to an end, what is something we as regular folks, he was such an incredible, towering figure in every aspect of it. What is something that we could take away, something we could be just a little bit more like him, or like the world that he wanted?
I think I could point, to three different things about Rabbi Schwartz. If I had to sort of sum up, what we can learn from him, there are certain things that are impossible to emulate. You can't emulate his, incredible memory. Either you have it or you don't have it. It's the Gemara refers to remembering everything that's a special siyata dishmaya. but you try to emulate those, aspects that are within the realm of attainable every single person according to their own kochos, according to their own abilities. So I'd say three different things. Number one, kavod atzmo, a sense of self-respect. He didn't depend on other people's accolades or honors to feel that he was worthy of accomplishing something in this world. He did a lot completely on his own. It's not like he was handpicked, that he was part of some rabbinic dynasty where you would point to him and say, oh, he's going to be the next Rebbe, he's going to be the next Rosh Yeshiva. He worked very, very hard on his own to become, a big Talmid Chacham, and he felt that he could rely upon his kochos, that he could rely upon his own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu for self-validation. And he treated not only others, but himself with a sense of self-respect. The way that he dressed, the way that he always carried himself with an air of dignity, and the way in which he always spoke with an air of refinement. So that's the first thing to take away is kavod atzmo. Second thing that I would take away is kavod Torah, that he always stood up for the principles of Torah. If he felt that somebody said something or did something that was disrespectful of Talmidei Chachamim, that was disrespectful of Chazal, he would speak out against it. He always stood up for the kavod of Torah, whether it was, the kavod of the CRC, or whether it was the kavod of any other aspect or institution of Torah, especially for the Gedaliah Dov. He had a tremendous respect for the integrity of Torah and halacha, and the integrity of Torah giants. He was always, for all of his worldly knowledge and all the French and the foreign phrases that he used and so forth, if you looked at Rabbi Schwartz during a quiet moment between one shaila and the next shaila, he always had a Gemara opened in front of him. I remember even when he would come to the Bez in America for a few days at a time, if there were shailos presented, cases presented, he would review them. Otherwise, he sat with the Gemara in front of him. That was, his lifeblood, his life force. His nefesh was the nefesh of Torah. It was the nefesh of, holding by Torah. He always was holding in all of the sugyos, the sense of kavod Torah, of respecting Torah, and respecting the Torah needs to be the ikar. You look at the introduction to one of his sfarim, it's, an amazing thing. He criticized, and again, every case is different and so forth, but I guess, the American rabbin at that time was not so focused on high-level learning. That's why, he published a sefer in the late 1950s of his chidushim throughout Shas, which I think he told me was the first sefer published by an American-born rabbi. Very interesting, I don't think he would say that lightly, so you have to do your research, but it says something with a haskama from Baron Kotler and so forth. And he wrote in his introduction, he didn't like that rabbis were spending so much time getting doctorates. He said, because, it's good to know things, on the side, but it has to be tougher. The main thing we should be focusing our energies on is the learning of Torah. It's very interesting. He knew more than many, many people who had doctorates in their fields knew probably. He never saw fit to, get a doctorate. He didn't think that was necessary. The main thing was, being a Rav, being, a high-level Rav, steeped in Torah learning. Very, very interesting. Again, not a criticism. As I said, every case, it says something about him. I think he may have picked it up from some comments. You look in the Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, in the Kobitz Shiurim, he makes a similar comment. I have a hunch that he may have picked up this attitude from there. Third thing is kavod abrius, that Schwartz was, the quintessential gentleman in the way that he treated everybody, and the way that he interacted with everybody, and also the tremendous patience that he had for people that were like frequent callers to the Beis Din, people who, may not necessarily have had, large families or, had jobs, and they would just, several times a week, they would reach out to Rabbi Schwartz with whatever was on their mind. They would need to schmooze, or call it rabbinic therapy, with all kinds of shilas, all kinds of different personalities. Sometimes if you're a Rav, it's difficult to have patience for certain types of, figures and personalities. But Schwartz always had patience. He always had patience for everybody all the time. I don't know how. How could you master everything and have all the time? And that this is like, they say this about many Gedolim. I still don't get it. Have all the time in the world, for anybody, it's still, be able to know everything. And all the time in the world, just a tremendous patience. It reminds me of the Medrash, Kodesh Baruch Hu said to Moshe and Aaron, "B'nai tchachonim heim savonim heim, amanas came to you mekablim aleichem." that you should know that they can be very difficult, Klal Yisrael. The sheep that you're going to have to shepherd, they can be very, very challenging. Amenas Cain. So you mekablim aleichem. But this is on this condition. That's why you become a leader, that you should be able to bear everybody, that you should be able to put up with everybody, have infinite patience with everybody, infinite patience, a tremendous kavod abrius. Those are the three things I think, we can all pick up a sense of kavod asmo, kavod Torah, and kavod abrius.
Wow, Reiss, this is incredible. Especially, I have the opportunity to meet and interact. For those of us who didn't necessarily, or those who heard, I'd highly encourage people to read the articles, the Sfarim, written by Rabbi Schwartz, to go on why you're trying to listen to. He gave the address as an example of my Chag HaSmicha a number of years ago. Really an inspirational human being. Rabbi Reiss, thank you so much for sharing. And I'd encourage everybody to take more time to read and follow Rabbi Reiss. And Rabbi Reiss just gave a very erudite share on vaccinations. Rabbi Reiss is always on the forefront of all of the issues confronting our community. It really is a pleasure, Rabbi Reiss. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today to come over from Chicago. And Be'ezus Hashem, we should have the opportunity of celebrating that Yehi Zichro Baruch, his memory should always be a blessing. You should be able to continue the flame of Torah that he brought and continues to bring to the community.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi Schwartz.